Thanks for joining us for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I'm here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Well, inflation, interest rates, volatility, it's certainly a time of great economic uncertainty. And returning to add his perspective is Tom Caldwell. He is the chairman of Caldwell Securities in Toronto. Tom, welcome back to Boom and Bust.
Thank you, Tony.
First, what's the state of things now? Give us your read of things.
Well, what's the phrase? There's no time more uncertain than the present. We've had the Fed increase the discount rate by 0.75%. That was more or less anticipated, a little bit more aggressive than some had thought, but it really hasn't impacted markets. I see the Dow's up about 140 points at the present time. So it really hasn't impacted. People have discounted the fact that we're going to have some increases in interest rates in an effort to curtail inflation to some degree. I do, however, feel that that's not particularly the right tool at this point. Oh,
really? Okay.
I think a lot of this inflationary pressures come from supply side constraints,
right?
Whether it be the supply chain, whether it be China's shutdown, whether it be the war in Ukraine, whether it be government policies that have curtailed energy production. So a lot of it has come from that side. Now, some of it is on the demand side. For example, employers are having to pay more because a lot of employees won't come back to work.
Right.
So that's sort of a supply demand. But I don't think all of this is particularly amenable to interest rates directly, other than possibly scaring people a little bit that, oh my gosh, the economy is going into a recession, which may or may not be the case. Central banks can take a slowdown and push into a recession very easily. They've done that historically. They exacerbate business cycles. But
because they overreact, Tom, is that why?
I think because they overreact, and by the time they act, it doesn't matter. For example, if you look at real estate market in Toronto, it's already cooling out.
Right.
Once governments decide to act, the market is already taking care of the issue at hand. But inflation is still there, and it's getting baked into our expectations. So I guess interest rates are a way of trying to address expectations more than substantive direct connect.
So, well, are you saying that interest rate hikes will continue for the time being or stabilize? What's your read on things?
I think they're going to have to take it as it comes. Now, remember, central banks are not a royal priesthood. Central bankers are very much influenced by the media, politicians. They all want to keep their jobs, etc. So they tend to go with what the popular consensus is. I think that raising interest rates probably the right thing to do right now, but I don't think you want to have a killer interest rate increase like during the time of Paul Volcker and 18% interest rates. I don't think we're going to do that trick again.
Okay. So it'll be a little bit higher, but not to the stratospheric levels we've seen historically in some eras. You were just mentioning a little bit there on home prices. You're seeing stabilization, a little bit of a drop-off. Is that what you're seeing the market as right now?
Well, it's quite a subjective call more than anything. As you know, we have a home in Niagara-on-the-Lake and also our historic house in Toronto. But I noticed, I just watched for sale signs. They seem to be sticking around a lot longer now. They're not getting snapped up the next day, and the bids are not coming in above asking price. So I'm not saying there's been a collapse. You read some headlines, they're down 15, 20%, et cetera. I think people are still trying these high prices just to see if they might get something. But in actual fact, nobody's rushing to the bait anymore. So it seems to be cooling out a little bit. Whether that means a decline is coming, I have absolutely no idea. But I do think it's cooling out for the time being.
And do you think, we've got about a minute before the break, do you think that housing starts will at least try to catch up a little bit?
Well, interest rates can impact there very definitely, because in mortgage and mortgage demand, i.e. house buyers, but we need a greater stock of housing. Now in Toronto, we're building condominiums, over old garages and stuff like that, whatever you can build a place, but we do need more homes. The country is growing, and some regions, such as the Toronto GTA area, are growing very quickly, but many of the outlying areas where they're accessible by GO train are also growing very, very quickly. Right. Down near Oh gosh, as you go around the lake, you're seeing communities develop that didn't even exist 3 years ago.
Right, right.
So we do need more stocks. I don't know that you're going to see much of a slowdown in that, but I think it's continuing. There's a demand.
We're going to continue our conversation with Thomas Caldwell after the break. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Tom Caldwell. He is the chairman of Caldwell Securities in Toronto. Tom, just coming back to inflation just for a second, how can people, maybe viewing this program, better guard against the effects of inflation? Is there any advice you'd give on that?
Well, it's kind of funny. There's an excellent book out there for investors, new investors, called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's a great primer for people. I saw an interview with a professor recently from the University of Alberta, and they were asking him, how do people protect hedge against these higher gasoline prices? And he was saying, well, you've got to buy a car with better mileage, and by the way, you're going to have to drive less. Meanwhile, he's sitting in an office with oil wells pumping outside his office. Did it dawn on him that if you want to protect against that, go and buy some of the oil companies that are making land office profits from higher prices? There's your hedge.
Right.
The only real hedge against inflation is stuff, whether it be land or houses or equities, companies, shares in the companies that benefit from it. I'm amazed, but how would I expect a university professor to come up with that answer? It's not possible.
Yeah, okay, but that's right. That's your business in effect at Caldwell Securities. Any securities company, they're looking for ways to beat inflation and to give a return on investment, right?
Well, my job is to help protect my clients' purchasing power.
Right.
And that's the best way to do that. I'm just giving a very simple example.
Sure.
That is so blatant, listening to this fellow with oil rigs pumping outside his office.
Sure.
And never made the connection.
Never made the connection.
That's one way of doing it. But people will adjust their tastes according to what they have in hand. You may not have steak, you may go to hamburger, or that kind of thing. You may ameliorate what it is you're going to. My wife does not allow me to go to a grocery store by myself because I can triple the bill buying all my favorite stuff. So it needs a pro to do it, not me.
Exactly. So obviously, this is a question I've been asking my guests recently. Does our country still work? No. Okay. I was going to talk about Pearson Airport or pipelines, but take it wherever you want to take it.
Well, it doesn't. In fact, I really wonder some days, do we have a country? For example, we've been talking about liquid natural gas plants for 25 years on the East Coast and the West Coast.
Exactly.
Which we would be cleaning up the world with natural gas in China instead of coal. And again, looking at Europe now, there's a big problem there in terms of energy supply. But we can't do it because we have special interest groups on the West Coast, and Quebec won't allow hydrocarbons to go across their borders. Do we have a country or not? In terms of policies, it seems to be our policies are just to cater to whatever the noisy special interest group is, and the same ones keep showing up and keep getting more and more money. So I can't blame them for playing the same tune. But sooner or later, we've got to have policies that will develop into jobs, policies that will build this economy. We have such incredible advantages in this country, not only in just resources, but in people, and people from all over the world with great skill set and great ideas and hungry for success. That's really where we should be going, but we miss it. Pearson Airport is a joke. I'm not. I have meetings I have to go to in New York. I'm not going anywhere until somebody can get something organized. But we seem to be in a chaotic period, particularly in the services that are really required to keep an economy going, but also in policies behind it. And regionalism and special interest have destroyed countries. Sir Wilfrid Laurier thought the 1900s, this was the century of Canada. And it could have been, and it was in many ways, but we're going backwards from there now as we go into this century. And we need leadership, different leadership.
And infrastructure, another case in point. We sadly need more advanced infrastructure, not getting it.
Well, absolutely true. I always, there was a protest some years ago, and I said, the guys you should blame is my generation, because I took the blessings of the previous generation that lived through the Depression, fought a world war, built all the highways, built the infrastructure, and it handed it on to us virtually debt-free, paying off the victory loans, et cetera. And then during Trudeau, the first era, we started spending money. So I said, my generation took the benefits of the previous generation, and we indebted your generation so I can live beyond my means in my generation. And that's where we have. I was thinking of John Kennedy's speech. Ask not what your country can do for you. What can you do for your country? We got to get back to that kind of thinking, I think.
We're having a good discussion, as usual, with Tom Caldwell. He is the chairman of Caldwell Securities in Toronto, talking about all things economic and, of course, the markets and the federal government and the provincial governments. We're going to continue the discussion after this break. Please stay with us. And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Caldwell Securities, Tom Caldwell. Tom, we were just talking about, some of the challenges that we have building things, getting things done. And I want to be fair about this and not be too judgmental, perhaps. Obviously, I do believe that the federal government has to take its share of the blame, but maybe it's not just a political problem. Give me your sense of your assessment of corporate Canada. Are they up to the job as well?
Well, I can't speak for corporate Canada. I think people running corporations are trying to do the best job they can with the country. But, I kind of think government, maybe it's a philosophical, I think government should be in the background providing the environment for people, whether they be people in corporations or individuals, to realize their greatest potential. The challenge in the corporate world is almost every business lobby has no voice in Ottawa, none whatsoever. We might as well drive up there in tractor trailers and protest again because we're going to get the same result. Well, they might not freeze their bank accounts, but there's not an openness to back and forth. If you look again back to the Second War, you had the dollar-a-year men from the corporate world and government moving back and forth. There was a liaison that was talking. Now, to quote years ago, there's like two solitudes. It's just nobody talks to each other.
Right.
And I know several groups that have gone to Ottawa, and I've spoken to the provincial government about the strangulation of how we regulate businesses so incredibly in this business. And you're getting that's fine. Really, thank you for coming. We really value the nonsense, and nothing gets done. So I think what happens in the corporate world, and remember, nobody's blameless. We're all flawed here. But it seems to me that there's got to be a greater openness to dealing with growth, dealing with future potential. I look at the city of Toronto. When I look back at the people who were, Gardner Expressway, Mayor Phillips, building the city, building a city for the future, building a subway, and we got off the building for the future. And I think that's true right through the country. We're trying to piece off and buy votes in the now versus a vision. And I think one of the worst things that I've seen in my time in this country was when the Prime Minister was debasing our pride in our country with all that trying to win support from interest groups of how bad we were as a country. No, we weren't. That's just lobbying kind of thing. But to pull down our pride in our country, a leader to do that is of no account. And we've got to get to the point of confidence, pride, enthusiasm, optimism, and let's go do something. That kind of vision. And we don't seem to be getting it from anywhere. And that's true of the corporate world too. It can be anywhere where everybody's gone into a holding pattern where the major concerns are just being politically correct. It's a joke. You can't say anything to anybody or criticize anything or say, let's get back to basics. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm ranting on that.
No, I do appreciate it.
It's easy to go there.
Yeah. Let's talk about labor shortages. You did mention that earlier on in the broadcast, obviously an issue too. How do we get more workers to work, do you think?
It's really interesting because, I've said to some of the people who stayed away and decided to run their business from their patios, I wouldn't have hired one person in our firm if during the interview you said to me, I'm going to be working from my home. No, you're not hired. Boom. But what happened? We had to make this allowance during the COVID problem. But what was an accommodation during a national crisis has now been perceived as a right, if you will.
That's right.
to work at home. And somehow employees think they're doing their employer a favor by coming into work from time to time. It doesn't work that way. If you change the rules, the game doesn't change. And so it's very hard getting people back into the office. And yet nobody wants to be draconian. And some people say, well, I'd rather, work from home and go in a day a week. And I hear this work-life balance. I don't know one rich person who's ever mentioned work-life balance to me. I've never had a balance in my life. I do my job as best I can and do my, cater to my family needs as best I can. But I know where my responsibilities are to provide for my family. It's a different mindset. And I don't know how we change that. That's almost sociological than anything else. I don't know the change that, but you are bidding up salaries. But maybe if we have a recession, maybe some of the fellows that are home or gals that are home are going to find themselves, they have to stay at home. So who knows? We'll see.
Indeed, and really, it'll be very interesting to see whether this is as a result of the times that we're in, COVID, and then maybe a downturn, or whether it is a real change of attitude that's ongoing. We're going to take another brief break. We'll be back with our guest, Tom Caldwell. After that break, please stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Boom and Bust. Our guest today is Tom Caldwell. He is the chairman of Caldwell Securities in Toronto for our monthly update with Tom. I'm going to go on a slightly different track to open up this last segment here because I want to be fair. This is a fair show, and all voices matter. And I saw that Canada's GDP growth is set to, or is projected to outperform all the other G7 countries over the next few months and perhaps years. Do we have some hidden strengths in this country, or is that just a statistic without a meaning?
Bar, number one, because you got to remember, Europe has some significant challenges facing it. A lot of the African and other countries do have major problems, particularly flowing out of this Ukraine business. Mm-hmm. Canada has wonderful advantages in our natural resource and frankly in our financial services sector as well. But let me give you an example. The Prospectors and Developers Association Conference, PDAC, took place here in Toronto. I think the record number of people attending that conference pre-COVID was about 30,000.
Right.
The registration this year is 42 or 48,000. I can't remember which. The resources, the mining business, that really is, we have wonderful natural advantages, but that tends to paper over the fact we're not building the manufacturing, the value added component of our economy.
Right.
So the statistics give us a false read. Now, this is happening in the States. America, again, going back to World War II, was the arsenal democracy. They made stuff, and they got away from making stuff, outsourcing to China and every place else. America is going to go back to making stuff again. They're onshoring, if you will. There's going to be big investments in rebuilding America's production capabilities. I don't know that we will participate in that move as we should, but we do have our resources and the inflationary pricing of copper, metals, everything, zinc, everything coming out of Canada. So we have a natural advantage, but it's not through brilliance, I'm afraid.
No, and you raise a good point that certainly President Biden, since the first day in office and ongoing, has been stressing supply chain, friendshoring, onshoring. He just recently inked a new framework, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, 13 countries working on supply chain and trade issues. Canada was not at that table, a bit concerning there. So we have to, I guess I'm putting it to you, do we have to step up a little bit in our trade relationships and our supply chain relationships?
Absolutely. Canada wasn't at that table, and Canada is not at any table. We are not really considered as a factor whatsoever internationally. And frankly, that's the fault of the Prime Minister. I mean, most of the G7 meetings is there for photo op, because it basically stays locked in the same climate change discussion. And the world has moved on from that. We're more concerned about, energy security right now. And he's we're not in the game at any level. Canada used to be. We were we were considered a bright middle power influence around the world. We couldn't even, listen, no matter how many African dictators he tried to bribe, we still couldn't get a temporary seat on the UN. And that's really shows our lack of status. But we should be included. Canada's a trading nation, somebody once said. Why aren't we in all these trading groups to the best of our ability? Because that's where we make our money. We cannot be totally dependent on America, because America isn't our friend every day either.
Right. And we got less than a minute left, but that's the point, isn't it? That this isn't just a question of status. It's a question of trade and our economy and growth and jobs.
Well, absolutely. This is so critical to the younger generation coming along in this country to have opportunities. We are a trading nation. We have to be involved in the trade game, and that means defense issues. Everything you got to be paying your ante to get into the game.
Right.
And we haven't been doing it, and we have to be better represented on the international stage, far better represented, because we're not. It's not that we're not considered seriously. We're not considered at all.
At all. Well, Tom Caldwell, on that note, not exactly the most uplifting, but still, we appreciate your counsel. It's great to have you back on. We'll see you next month.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All the best. Another excellent discussion with Thomas Caldwell. Always a lot of insights about the markets and the broader issues that are affecting us, our economy, our trade relationship, all of those things that affect you, your job, and inflation and affordability. Thanks for watching again today.